Sophia had spent years building a life that seemed almost impossible to improve. As the founder and CEO of a highly successful corporate empire, she was known for her intelligence, discipline, and ability to dominate even the most demanding boardroom negotiations. Her employees respected her, competitors feared her, and the business world regarded her as a woman who had earned every piece of her success through relentless effort. Yet the moment she stepped through the gates of her private estate, that formidable executive persona softened. At home, Sophia did not want to be treated like a powerful CEO. She wanted to be a wife, and Hudson seemed to understand that better than anyone. He brought her coffee in the morning, reminded her to eat when she became absorbed in work, helped her into her blazer before important meetings, and kissed her forehead before she left for the office. These gestures were small, but to Sophia they meant more than expensive gifts or dramatic declarations of love. They reassured her that behind the pressure of wealth, responsibility, and public success, she had a partner who cared about her simply as a woman. She trusted Hudson deeply and believed their marriage was built on affection, loyalty, and mutual respect. She had even given him an important position as a marketing manager within one of her subsidiary companies, not because she wanted to hand him an easy career, but because she genuinely believed in his abilities and wanted them to build a future together. In Sophia's mind, they were not merely husband and wife, they were a team. Hudson, however, experienced their marriage very differently. At home, he enjoyed the privileges that came with Sophia's wealth, but at work, those same privileges became a constant reminder of how others viewed him. His colleagues were polite and professional, yet he could sense the unspoken assumption that his rapid advancement had more to do with being married to the company's owner than with his own talent. No one openly insulted him, but the knowledge quietly damaged his pride. He wanted to be respected for himself rather than seen as a man standing in the shadow of a more successful wife. The insecurity remained buried until Haley joined his marketing department. She was young, inexperienced, and noticeably different from the polished executives Hudson dealt with every day. She came from a modest background, worried constantly about money, and often seemed overwhelmed by the demands of corporate life. Their relationship changed after she made a serious mistake on an important financial projection. Expecting anger or even dismissal, Haley stood in Hudson's office, close to tears, and apologized repeatedly. Instead of reprimanding her, Hudson surprised himself by responding with patience. He stayed late to help her correct the report, explaining every error and guiding her through the work until the problem was resolved. During those long hours, Haley began telling him about her life outside the office. She spoke about her sick mother, the financial pressure on her family, and the responsibility she felt to help support them. Hudson listened, and something about the way Haley looked at him affected him more deeply than he expected. She did not treat him as Sophia's husband or as a manager whose authority came from family connections. She looked at him as though he were the person who had rescued her from disaster. That admiration became dangerously addictive. Haley thanked him, constantly praised his kindness, and made him feel important in a way he had rarely experienced before. Around Sophia, Hudson often felt like the less successful half of an extraordinary couple. Around Haley, he felt powerful, capable, and generous. He began finding excuses to spend more time with her. At first, their conversations remained connected to work. Haley asked for advice about assignments, presentations, and office politics, while Hudson took pleasure in being the experienced mentor she relied upon. Gradually, however, professional discussions gave way to personal conversations. She told him about her fears and frustrations, and he began sharing his own dissatisfaction carefully, presenting himself as a man whose efforts were often overlooked. When he saw Haley eating an inexpensive lunch alone one afternoon, he offered to take her to a restaurant. He justified the invitation as a manager rewarding a hard-working employee, but both of them understood that something had shifted. During the meal, Haley spoke openly about how difficult it was to live with constant financial limitations. Hudson paid the bill without hesitation, enjoying the gratitude in her expression. For perhaps the first time in years, he felt like the wealthy and powerful provider rather than the husband of a wealthy woman. One lunch became another, and soon Hudson was searching for reasons to see Haley outside ordinary working hours. They stayed late at the office even when there was no urgent project. Their messages became increasingly personal, and Haley stopped addressing him formally. Hudson began answering her texts during evenings, with Sophia sometimes hiding his phone beneath the table while his wife talked about business plans or future vacations. The secrecy should have frightened him, but instead it created an intoxicating sense of danger. Every hidden message strengthened the emotional bond between him and Haley, while weakening the invisible boundaries of his marriage. Before long, the relationship crossed the line from inappropriate closeness into outright betrayal. Hudson began constructing two separate versions of himself: the devoted husband who smiled warmly at Sophia each morning, and the attentive protector who promised Haley that he would always be available whenever she needed him. The changes in Hudson's behavior were subtle enough that Sophia initially dismissed them. His phone, once left casually on tables and kitchen counters, was now rarely out of his hand. He carried it into the bathroom, placed it face down during meals, and moved away whenever certain calls came through. His work schedule also became increasingly unpredictable. He claimed that the marketing department was under intense pressure and began staying late several nights a week. Because Sophia understood the demands of corporate life better than anyone, she tried to be supportive rather than suspicious. When she offered to send food to the office, Hudson often refused, claiming that he would order something with his team. She accepted the explanation because she wanted to believe there was nothing unusual about it. Then came the smaller details that were harder to ignore. One night, Hudson returned home long after dinner, and when Sophia embraced him, she noticed a sweet, unfamiliar perfume on his shirt. It was not a fragrance she wore, nor did it resemble anything normally present in their home. Hudson reacted quickly, explaining that it probably belonged to a female colleague who had spent hours with him in a crowded conference room. The excuse sounded reasonable, and Sophia told herself she was being unfair for questioning him. On other days, Hudson seemed especially affectionate, sending flowers to her office or preparing breakfast for her in bed. Those gestures made her feel guilty for doubting him and temporarily pushed her suspicions away. Still, the uneasiness never completely disappeared. Her concern grew stronger when she reviewed their financial statements and discovered an unusually large charge from an exclusive luxury boutique. Sophia knew she had purchased nothing there. When she asked Hudson about it, he smiled awkwardly and claimed that he had bought her a surprise birthday gift. His explanation was convincing enough to make her relax, yet something in his brief expression before answering stayed in her mind. It had looked less like the embarrassment of a husband whose surprise had been discovered and more like panic. Sophia did not accuse him of anything. She continued behaving as she always had, sharing meals with him, discussing their future, and accepting his affectionate gestures. But beneath that calm exterior, a quiet instinct had begun to awaken. The same intuition that had helped her recognize dishonest business partners and dangerous negotiations was now warning her that something inside her marriage was no longer what it appeared to be. She still wanted to believe Hudson. She still wanted every strange detail to have an innocent explanation. Yet for the first time, Sophia could no longer silence the thought that the perfect life she trusted so completely might already be beginning to collapse. Sophia tried to convince herself that the strange charge on the credit card statement had a harmless explanation. Hudson had always enjoyed surprising her, and the idea that he had purchased an expensive birthday gift was entirely believable. When she questioned him, he responded quickly, smiling as though she had accidentally ruined a carefully planned romantic gesture. He told her that an exclusive handbag had finally become available in the exact leather finish she liked, and that he had intended to keep it hidden until her birthday. For several hours, the explanation soothed her. She even felt guilty for having doubted him. Yet as the days passed, the comfort faded. The more she thought about his reaction, the more she remembered the split second of alarm in his eyes before the smile appeared. It was too brief to accuse him of anything, but Sophia had built her career by noticing expressions that other people missed. In negotiations, that tiny hesitation could reveal fear, deception, or weakness. Now, for the first time, she was applying the same instinct to the man sleeping beside her. A few days later, curiosity pushed her into the large walk-in closet they shared. She told herself that she merely wanted to know which handbag Hudson had chosen. If he had purchased something that expensive, perhaps he had hidden it somewhere among their storage cabinets, luggage, or seasonal boxes. Sophia searched casually at first, almost amused by the idea of discovering his surprise early. She checked the upper shelves, opened several decorative cases, and looked behind garment bags. Nothing appeared. The handbag was nowhere in the closet. She stood silently in the center of the room and considered the obvious explanation. Perhaps Hudson had kept it at the office precisely because he knew she might stumble across it at home. That possibility made sense, but instead of settling her nerves, it created another question. Why did she suddenly feel compelled to verify every detail of his stories? The answer frightened her more than she wanted to admit. She no longer trusted the explanations automatically. That afternoon, Sophia entered Hudson's private home office. She had rarely gone through his desk because their marriage had never required that kind of behavior. Privacy had always been respected without discussion. She therefore felt a deep sense of discomfort as she moved around the room, almost as though she were crossing a boundary she had once considered sacred. She initially pretended to herself that she was searching for a corporate tax document. Her hands moved through ordinary paperwork folders, invoices, and archived reports. Most of the drawers contained exactly what she expected. Then she noticed that one lower desk drawer normally locked had been left slightly open. Sophia hesitated. A part of her wanted to shut it immediately and leave the room. Another part, the sharper instinct that had protected her in business for years, told her that walking away would be an act of deliberate blindness. She slowly pulled the drawer open. Beneath a stack of financial documents sat a thin folder containing several miscellaneous receipts. Nothing looked important until she unfolded an automotive service invoice. Her eyes stopped on the license plate number. It belonged to her white Porsche. Sophia read the number twice to make sure she had not made a mistake. She had not authorized any repair, nor had she been told that the vehicle had needed mechanical work. Her attention moved to the date. The service had been completed on a Tuesday, 2 weeks earlier, a day she remembered clearly because Hudson had claimed he was in Chicago, attending a regional client conference. He had called her from what he described as a hotel lobby, complained about delayed meetings, and returned home the following evening with an elaborate story about difficult negotiations. Yet according to the invoice in her hand, her car had been nowhere near Chicago. It had been serviced at a small independent garage nearly 40 miles outside the city. Sophia's pulse quickened as she read the address again. The location seemed strangely familiar. Then a memory surfaced. Hudson had once mentioned that Haley lived in a distant working-class suburb and faced an exhausting commute to the office each day. Sophia had paid little attention at the time. Now she remembered the name of the town. It was the same area printed on the receipt. The coincidence was too precise. She lowered herself slowly into Hudson's desk chair, still holding the paper. Until that moment, every suspicious detail could be explained individually. The perfume might have belonged to a colleague. The hidden phone might have been related to confidential business. The late nights could have been genuine work pressure. Even the luxury purchase could have been a birthday present. But this invoice linked several lies together. Hudson had claimed to be hundreds of miles away, while Sophia's car was being repaired near Haley's neighborhood. The evidence was no longer emotional intuition. It was documented fact. Sophia felt the first real fracture inside her marriage. Her immediate instinct was to call Hudson and demand an explanation. Anger surged through her so violently that she could already imagine the confrontation, his shocked expression, her questions, perhaps another carefully prepared excuse. Then the executive part of her mind took control. She had negotiated hostile acquisitions, exposed dishonest partners, and survived boardroom conflicts because she never revealed her position before understanding the full battlefield. Confronting Hudson now would only warn him that she had discovered something. He could delete messages, move money, destroy documents, or coordinate his story with Haley. One receipt proved a lie, but Sophia wanted more than a lie. She wanted the entire truth. With controlled movements, she placed the invoice back exactly where she had found it. The folder returned beneath the stack of papers, the drawer slid shut, and the room looked untouched. When Hudson came home that evening, Sophia greeted him normally. She asked about his day, poured him tea, and listened as he described meetings and marketing problems with the same effortless confidence he had always used. Watching him speak was almost unbearable. Each sentence now sounded rehearsed. Every smile seemed calculated. She studied him without appearing to study him, noticing how naturally he lied while sitting only a few feet away from the woman who had trusted him for years. Over the next several days, Sophia became an observer inside her own marriage. She paid attention to everything. Hudson placed his phone face down whenever she entered a room. He carried it with him even when walking only a few steps away. Certain calls caused his shoulders to tighten before he excused himself. His explanations for late meetings became increasingly detailed, almost as though unnecessary detail could make them more convincing. Sophia said nothing. Outwardly, she remained the same supportive wife. Internally, she was cataloging inconsistencies. Then another late-night excuse gave her the opportunity she needed. Hudson sent a message saying he would not return home until after midnight because he was entertaining visiting investors at a downtown restaurant. Sophia responded politely and wished him a productive evening. Instead of remaining at home, however, she took a second vehicle and drove toward the newly completed estate she had spent years designing. The property had enormous personal meaning to her. It was not simply another investment in her real estate portfolio. Sophia had imagined it as the future home where she and Hudson might eventually raise children. She had selected the flooring, lighting, furniture, architectural details, and landscaping herself. Every room represented a future she believed they would share. The house was supposed to be vacant until they were ready to move in. As Sophia approached the gated community that night, she expected darkness. Instead, she saw a warm yellow light glowing from the upper floor. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel. For several minutes, she remained parked at a distance, searching for an innocent explanation. Perhaps security staff were inspecting the property. Maybe a contractor had forgotten to switch off a light. She almost persuaded herself to leave when a shadow crossed the master bedroom window. The silhouette belonged to a woman. Sophia did not storm inside. She did not call Hudson. She simply stared at the illuminated window long enough to understand that whatever she found there would change her life permanently. Then she drove home. Hudson arrived much later, smelling faintly of wine. He climbed into bed beside her and fell asleep quickly, unaware that Sophia was lying awake in the darkness. She listened to his breathing and felt a strange transformation beginning inside her. The fear of discovering the truth was disappearing. In its place came a colder need to know everything. The following morning, after Hudson left for work, Sophia returned to the estate. The moment she opened the front door, she knew someone had been living there. The house no longer carried the clean scent of new construction and polished surfaces. The air contained cooking smells, artificial vanilla fragrance, and the unmistakable heaviness of everyday occupation. Protective coverings had been removed from furniture. A used coffee mug sat on the glass table. Fashion magazines were scattered casually in the living room. In the kitchen, takeout containers and empty food packages filled the trash. Sophia moved through each room in silence. Every object felt like an intrusion. Upstairs, the evidence became unmistakable. The master bedroom had been transformed from the elegant space Sophia had designed into someone else's personal environment. Bright floral sheets covered the bed. Cheap cosmetics were scattered across the marble vanity. Women's clothing hung inside the walk-in closet. Snacks, personal belongings, and signs of daily living appeared everywhere she looked. Then she found a photograph of Hudson. The truth no longer required interpretation. Haley was living in Sophia's house. Not visiting occasionally. Not meeting Hudson secretly for a few hours. She had been installed there comfortably, surrounded by luxury that Sophia had paid for and planned for her own future. The realization struck harder than the affair itself. Hudson had not merely betrayed his marriage. He had taken the physical symbols of Sophia's work money and dreams and used them to create a fantasy life for another woman. Sophia stood beside the bed, unable to move for several moments. Her first reaction was shock, so intense that the room seemed distant and unreal. She wanted to believe there had been some extraordinary misunderstanding, but there was nothing left to misunderstand. The cosmetics belonged to Haley. The clothes belonged to Haley. Hudson's photograph confirmed the connection. The house Sophia had imagined as a family sanctuary had become the secret setting for her husband's deception. Pain followed the shock. Memories of ordinary married life suddenly changed meaning. Hudson bringing her coffee. Hudson kissing her goodbye. Hudson promising to work late. Hudson talking about their future while secretly maintaining another one only miles away. Sophia felt as though someone had rewritten years of her life without permission, but she did not cry. Instead, she reached for her phone and began taking photographs. She documented the clothing, the cosmetics, the bedding, the food, the trash, and every visible sign that someone had established residence inside the property. She photographed details from multiple angles, not as an emotional wife collecting painful memories, but as an executive preserving evidence. By the time she finished, Sophia had made a decision. She would not confront Hudson yet. He believed she was still ignorant, and that belief gave her an advantage. From that moment forward, she began building a complete picture of his double life. She reviewed transaction histories more carefully than before, matching restaurant charges, luxury purchases, transfers, and unexplained expenses against Hudson's schedule. Patterns emerged almost immediately. Expensive dinners he described as client meetings occurred on evenings when his movements suggested otherwise. Jewelry purchases had nothing to do with family gifts. Large amounts of money disappeared into purchases that Sophia had never seen. The deeper she looked, the clearer the arrangement became. Hudson was using Sophia's wealth to create the image of a powerful provider for Haley. He paid for meals with money that was not his. He bought gifts using accounts funded by Sophia. He He drove her car, occupied her property, and enjoyed access to a lifestyle created by her business success. Yet in Haley's presence, he presented these privileges as though they were evidence of his own status. Sophia finally understood what had drawn him into the affair. It was not simply attraction. Haley gave Hudson something his ego desperately wanted: the opportunity to feel richer, stronger, and more important than he believed himself to be. Sophia's success had always existed beside him as a reminder that much of his privileged life depended on her. Haley, by contrast, treated him as the source of that privilege. To her, he could pretend to be the generous man controlling the mansion, the cars, the credit cards, and the endless flow of money. The discovery disgusted Sophia. Still, she needed proof of the conversations behind the spending. She began monitoring Hudson's patterns more carefully and eventually obtained access to information that confirmed what the financial records had already suggested. The affectionate voice he used with Haley was painfully familiar. It was the same tenderness he had once reserved for Sophia. He promised Haley money when she complained about expenses. He reassured her when she became bored in the estate. He arranged luxury services whenever she wanted something changed. He spoke as if Sophia's property belonged to him. The betrayal became even uglier when Sophia heard the way he referred to his wife when he believed she could not hear him. Hudson portrayed Sophia not as the woman who had supported him, trusted him, and helped build his career, but as an obstacle standing between him and the life he wanted with Haley. He mocked her while continuing to rely on everything she provided. Each new conversation stripped away another layer of the man Sophia thought she had married. For a while, heartbreak remained stronger than anger. She remembered how safe she had once felt beside him. She remembered discussing children, holidays, renovations, and retirement. She thought about how easily he had held her hand across restaurant tables while secretly communicating with another woman. The contrast was almost impossible to accept. Sophia had spent years evaluating people accurately in business, yet she had allowed herself to believe that love existed in a separate world where strategy and suspicion were unnecessary. That realization wounded her pride as deeply as the affair wounded her heart. Then disbelief gave way to fury. She began seeing Hudson differently. The man who had once appeared affectionate now seemed opportunistic. His romantic gestures looked less meaningful when placed beside the evidence of his deception. Even his professional frustrations appeared in a new light. Rather than building an identity independent of Sophia's success, he had used her resources to manufacture one in front of someone more easily impressed. Yet Sophia refused to let anger control her actions. That was the final stage of her transformation. The emotional storm inside her gradually hardened into discipline. Every photograph was stored securely. Every suspicious transaction was recorded. Every important conversation became another piece of the larger pattern. Sophia stopped asking herself whether Hudson was cheating. That question had already been answered beyond doubt. She now focused on the scale of the betrayal and the precise way she would eventually respond. At home, nothing seemed different. She still sat across from Hudson at breakfast. She listened to his work stories, answered questions about her schedule, and occasionally smiled when expected. Hudson interpreted her calmness as proof that his secret remained safe. Haley continued enjoying a luxurious home that did not belong to her, spending money she had not earned and waiting for Hudson to visit. Neither of them understood how completely their hidden world had already been exposed. Sophia knew about the affair. She knew about the house. She knew about the money, the dinners, the gifts, the car, and the lies. Most importantly, she now understood the man behind them. The husband she had loved had disappeared beneath layers of deceit, entitlement, and resentment. In his place, Sophia saw someone who had mistaken her trust for weakness and her generosity for something he was entitled to exploit. She was no longer searching for the truth. She had found it. Now she was simply waiting for the right moment to reveal that Hudson and Haley had been living inside a secret that was no longer secret at all. By the time Hudson announced that he had to leave for Chicago, Sophia had learned how effortless his lies could sound. It happened over breakfast in the same kitchen where they had once discussed vacations, investments, and the family they hoped to build together. Hudson spread jam across a piece of toast and explained that an unexpected crisis had erupted at the company's regional branch. According to him, an important client was threatening to terminate a distribution agreement, and his presence was urgently required for the next 3 days. He delivered the story with practiced frustration, adding a regretful sigh when he mentioned that their quiet weekend together would have to be canceled. Months earlier, Sophia would have accepted every word without hesitation. Now she recognized the performance immediately. She raised her eyes from her tea and studied him across the marble island. There was no visible nervousness, no shame, not even the slightest hesitation. Hudson had become so comfortable deceiving her that he could invent an entire corporate emergency while looking directly into her face. That realization disturbed Sophia more than the lie itself. He was no longer improvising to escape suspicion. Dishonesty had become natural to him. Still, she gave him exactly the reaction he expected. Of course, business comes first. Her voice remained calm and supportive. She even asked whether he wanted help packing. Hudson's shoulders relaxed almost immediately. He declined the offer and hurried upstairs, apparently relieved that his explanation had succeeded. Sophia remained seated for several seconds after he disappeared. She could hear drawers opening above her and the muted sounds of luggage being prepared. The irony was almost unbearable. Her husband was packing expensive clothes purchased through the lifestyle she had built so that he could take another woman on a romantic vacation. And he expected Sophia to remain at home believing he was saving an important corporate account. She refused to give him the satisfaction of knowing that his deception had hurt her. When Hudson returned downstairs carrying a sleek travel bag, Sophia had already restored the expression of a trusting wife. He embraced her near the front door, apologized again for leaving on such short notice, and promised to bring her something from Chicago. Sophia returned the embrace without allowing the tension in her body to betray her. Then she watched him walk toward her white Porsche. That detail mattered. Hudson owned access to other transportation, yet he had chosen the car Sophia valued most. She had purchased it as a reward to herself after years of demanding work and difficult business victories. Watching him place his luggage inside it felt like another small act of appropriation. He was not merely lying to her, he was taking pieces of her life and carrying them into his affair. Hudson lowered himself into the driver's seat, started the engine, and waved through the windshield. Sophia waved back. The gates opened and the Porsche disappeared down the private road. Only then did her smile vanish. She walked directly into her home office and closed the door. There would be no emotional confrontation, no desperate phone calls, and no demand that Hudson return home. He had chosen to continue the deception. Sophia intended to let him believe it was still working. Her computer became a command center. The tracking information appeared on the monitor, and a small marker showed the Porsche moving steadily away from the estate. If Hudson were actually flying to Chicago, his route should eventually take him toward the airport. Sophia watched in silence as the vehicle approached the point where the roads divided. For several minutes, the marker followed a plausible path. Then it turned. Not toward the airport. East. Sophia leaned slightly closer to the screen as the Porsche merged onto the Long Island Expressway. There was no business flight waiting for Hudson. No regional emergency. No desperate client. His destination was unmistakable. The Hamptons. The confirmation produced almost no surprise. By now, Sophia had stopped expecting innocence from him. What she felt instead was a grim satisfaction that another lie had become measurable evidence. Hudson could rewrite conversations, deny intentions, and manufacture excuses, but a moving vehicle left a trail that did not care about his explanations. Sophia continued watching. The marker traveled farther across Long Island while Hudson presumably believed his wife was working peacefully at home. Somewhere along the route, he collected Haley, and together they continued east toward one of the most luxurious vacation destinations in the region. Sophia imagined the scene without difficulty. Haley beside him, Hudson playing the generous provider, her Porsche beneath them. Her money financing whatever hotel, restaurant, shopping trip, or entertainment they selected. It was almost absurd. Hudson wanted to feel like a wealthy man capable of giving Haley an extraordinary life, yet nearly every symbol supporting that fantasy belonged to Sophia. He had mistaken access for ownership. Worse, he seemed to believe that because Sophia had trusted him with her resources, he had somehow earned the right to use them against her. Sophia could have stopped the trip immediately. One phone call could have frozen a card. Another could have exposed Hudson's fabricated business emergency. She could have demanded the return of her car before they reached their destination. She did none of those things. Evidence gathered voluntarily was far more powerful than a confession extracted under pressure. Hudson and Haley believed themselves protected by Sophia's ignorance. As long as they maintained that illusion, they would continue making mistakes. Sophia therefore waited. She contacted Rachel, one of the few people she trusted completely, and asked her to watch Haley's public social media activity. Sophia had already formed a clear impression of the younger woman's personality. Haley did not simply enjoy luxury. She needed other people to see her enjoying it. Expensive meals, designer purchases, beautiful houses, and prestigious destinations became more valuable when they could be displayed to an audience. A secret weekend in the Hamptons would test that need for attention. Sophia suspected Haley would fail. Hours passed. The Porsche continued moving east while Sophia worked quietly at her desk. She answered several business emails, reviewed a financial report, and even joined a brief conference call. To anyone observing her, the afternoon would have appeared completely ordinary. Then her phone vibrated. It was Rachel. A short message appeared on the screen telling her to check Haley's account immediately. Sophia opened Instagram. A new story had been posted. For a moment, she simply stared at the glowing circle around Haley's profile picture. Her finger hovered over the screen. She already knew that whatever appeared next would hurt, yet avoiding it would accomplish nothing. She tapped. The video began inside Sophia's Porsche. Haley was filming from the driver's side, displaying the luxury interior as though the vehicle belonged to her. One hand rested confidently on the steering wheel. On her face was a pair of oversized designer sunglasses. Sophia recognized them instantly. They were hers. She had left them inside the car. Haley had not merely entered Sophia's marriage and occupied Sophia's house. She was now casually wearing Sophia's belongings while broadcasting the experience online. The camera shifted. Hudson appeared beside her. He looked relaxed and delighted, smiling toward the phone with none of the tension he displayed when inventing excuses at home. The highway stretched behind them beneath the summer sky, leaving no ambiguity about the nature of the trip. This was not Chicago. It was not business. It was two people openly enjoying a romantic getaway financed by the woman they were deceiving. Then Sophia saw the caption. She read it once. Then again. Road trip to the Hamptons with my future hubby. Her jaw tightened. But the next line was worse. The clueless sugar mama wife at home has no idea we're living the high life. For several seconds, Sophia stopped hearing the sounds around her. The office seemed to disappear. She had already known about the affair. She knew about the dinners, gifts, lies, and secret house. She had heard enough conversations to understand how deeply Hudson had betrayed her. Yet the words on the screen crossed a different boundary. This was no longer simply infidelity. It was contempt. Haley was sitting inside Sophia's Porsche, wearing Sophia's sunglasses, traveling on a vacation, financed through resources belonging to Sophia, beside a man whose career and luxurious lifestyle had been strengthened by Sophia's support, and she was publicly mocking the woman who had paid for almost everything surrounding them. Even more painful was Hudson's presence in the video. He was smiling. Whatever Haley thought of Sophia, Hudson had allowed that contempt to grow. He had portrayed his wife as someone foolish enough to exploit. He had given Haley the confidence to believe that Sophia could be ridiculed without consequence. The insult struck deeper than Sophia expected. For a brief moment, the disciplined CEO disappeared beneath the wounded wife. She remembered Hudson kissing her forehead before work. She remembered the mornings he had prepared breakfast, the evenings they had discussed their future, the promises they had made about growing old together. She remembered defending him when others questioned whether he deserved his position. She had wanted him to succeed because she believed his victories belonged to both of them. And now he was sitting in her car while another woman called her a clueless source of money. Sophia felt humiliation burn through her chest. Then something changed. The pain did not disappear. It condensed. Grief became anger. Anger became clarity. Sophia looked at the video again, but this time she did not see herself as the woman being mocked. She saw evidence. Haley had made a catastrophic mistake. Until now, much of the betrayal had existed behind closed doors, private conversations, hidden purchases, secret meetings, concealed financial transactions. Haley had just taken their deception and attached her own face, Hudson's face, Sophia's property, their destination, and an explicit statement of intent to a public account. Sophia immediately saved the video. She captured screenshots of the profile, the timestamp, the caption, the Porsche interior, Hudson's face, Haley wearing her sunglasses, and every detail that could later become relevant. Copies were stored in more than one secure location. Nothing would be deleted from Sophia's side. If Haley removed the story 5 minutes later, it would not matter. The evidence now belonged to Sophia. She leaned back in her chair and stared at the frozen image of Hudson, smiling beside his mistress. There would be consequences. Not because Sophia needed to prove that she was wealthier or more powerful than Haley. That had never been in question. What mattered was that Hudson and Haley had interpreted restraint as weakness. They believed her trust made her easy to manipulate. They had mistaken silence for ignorance and generosity for stupidity. Sophia was finished allowing them to make that mistake. She reached for her phone and called her father. Arthur answered quickly. Sophia did not begin with a long explanation. Her voice was controlled when she told him that Hudson had betrayed their marriage. Silence followed. Arthur had spent decades building his own business empire and understood his daughter well enough to recognize the significance of her tone. Sophia was not calling because she needed someone to comfort her. If she had reached him only after gathering evidence, the situation was already serious. Rather than describe every discovery verbally, Sophia assembled the material she had collected. She included photographs from the estate records of suspicious spending evidence of Hudson's movements, information about his relationship with Haley, and finally the Instagram story from the Hamptons. She sent the file to Arthur. His response came shortly afterward. The anger in his voice was unmistakable. Arthur had tolerated many things during a long career filled with aggressive competitors and ruthless negotiations, but betrayal within his family was different. He was furious not only because Hudson had cheated on Sophia, but because he had exploited the opportunities, resources, and trust that had been extended to him. Seeing Haley publicly ridicule his daughter while enjoying Sophia's property transformed his anger into something far more personal. Arthur wanted to act immediately. Sophia stopped him. She had not spent weeks gathering information simply to allow rage to determine the ending. She wanted control. The confrontation would happen when Hudson and Haley believed themselves safest. They would return from the Hamptons expecting to continue their secret life exactly as before. Hudson would invent another story about Chicago. Haley would return to the house she had occupied without permission. The two of them would assume Sophia remained the same trusting woman they had mocked online. Sophia intended to destroy that assumption in a single moment. Arthur listened as his daughter explained what she wanted. By the end of the conversation, he agreed to stand beside her. Over the next 2 days, Sophia continued monitoring the Porsche's location, while Haley supplied additional glimpses of their vacation through social media. The couple enjoyed expensive meals, coastal scenery, and the kind of leisure Hudson liked to present as his own generosity. Every new display reinforced the same truth: they were celebrating a fantasy built from someone else's success. Sophia no longer watched with heartbreak. She watched with patience. Her focus had shifted completely. The investigation was over. Now she was preparing for the moment when the people who had treated her as an invisible source of money would finally have to face her. Arthur arranged the support necessary for the confrontation, while Sophia concentrated on timing. She studied the route between the Hamptons and the city, followed the Porsche's movements, and waited for the weekend to end. Sunday finally arrived. The marker on Sophia's screen moved away from the coast. Hudson and Haley were coming back. Inside the Porsche, they had every reason to feel confident. Their romantic escape had gone exactly as planned. Sophia had never called to question Hudson's supposed business trip. No credit card had been canceled. No furious message had appeared on Haley's phone. Nothing suggested that their secret had been discovered. Perhaps Hudson was already preparing the story he would tell when he returned home. He could complain about exhausting negotiations in Chicago, mention delayed meetings, and apologize for being tired. Sophia could imagine him walking through the door with the same convincing expression he had used dozens of times before. But there would be no ordinary return home. Sophia changed into dark, sharply tailored clothes and prepared to leave. Arthur arrived with the calm authority of a man who had already decided where his loyalty stood. Before they departed, he looked at his daughter, carefully giving her one final opportunity to reconsider. Sophia did not hesitate. The woman who had once searched desperately for innocent explanations no longer existed. She had given Hudson trust. He had converted it into deception. She had given him opportunity. He had turned it into entitlement. She had shared her wealth, home, and future with him. He had used all three to impress another woman. And after taking those things, he and Haley had laughed at the person who made their stolen fantasy possible. Sophia checked the tracking screen. The Porsche was moving steadily west. Hudson and Haley were driving back toward the city, relaxed after their weekend together, and completely unaware that every mile was bringing them closer to the woman they believed they had fooled. Sophia watched the marker advance. This time she was not waiting for another piece of evidence. She was waiting for them. The Porsche continued west under the late afternoon sun, gliding through traffic with the smooth confidence of a car built for speed. Inside, Hudson and Haley were relaxed after their weekend in the Hamptons. The tension that had defined Hudson's double life seemed far away for the moment. He had spent 3 days surrounded by expensive restaurants, ocean views, private lounges, and the kind of luxury that allowed him to pretend he was exactly the man he wanted Haley to believe he was. He had paid without hesitation, spoken confidently about future trips, and behaved as though every privilege surrounding them had been created by his own success. Haley had encouraged the fantasy at every step. She laughed, easily leaned against him when they drove, and spoke about the future as though Sophia had already been erased from it. Neither of them noticed how vulnerable their confidence had become. They believed the greatest danger was behind them because Sophia had never challenged the supposed Chicago trip. There had been no suspicious call, no frozen card, no unexpected confrontation. To Hudson, that silence meant success. To Sophia, it meant the trap was still intact. Several miles away, Sophia sat in the passenger seat of a black SUV with her phone mounted in front of her. The red tracking marker moved steadily across the map. Arthur sat beside her, his expression unreadable, while another security vehicle followed at a distance. Sophia watched the screen with the concentration she normally reserved for multimillion-dollar negotiations. Every mile mattered. She had no interest in chasing the Porsche recklessly or creating chaos without control. She wanted the confrontation to happen where Hudson could not simply accelerate away, where witnesses would already be nearby, and where he would understand immediately that the secret life he had protected so carefully was finished. Ahead, a section of the highway narrowed because of construction. Concrete barriers reduced the available lanes and slowed the flow of traffic. Sophia had chosen the location deliberately. It offered exactly what she needed: limited room, reduced speed, and enough surrounding motorists to ensure that whatever happened next would not remain private. She looked at the distance displayed on the screen. The Porsche was approaching. Arthur turned toward her. He had remained quiet for most of the journey. His anger toward Hudson had not diminished, but he understood that this was Sophia's confrontation. He would stand behind her, protect her if necessary, and make certain Hudson could not manipulate the situation, but he would not take control away from his daughter. "Are you certain?" he asked. Sophia kept her eyes on the map. "Completely." There was no tremor in her voice. A few minutes later, the Porsche became visible through the windshield. For Sophia, the sight produced an unexpected stillness. She recognized the shape of the car instantly, the white body reflecting sunlight between darker vehicles. She had driven it to business meetings after difficult victories. She had taken it alone on quiet roads when she needed space to think. Now Hudson was behind its wheel with Haley beside him, returning from a romantic weekend financed by the woman he had betrayed. Sophia felt no sudden need to scream. She only thought, there they are. Inside the Porsche, Hudson was talking casually about what he would say when he returned home. He planned to tell Sophia that the Chicago negotiations had been exhausting but successful. He would probably mention a delayed flight and a difficult client dinner. The details did not matter much. He had learned that confidence was often more persuasive than truth. Haley listened with amusement, mocking the idea that Sophia might ask questions. After the Instagram story, she felt almost invincible. Nothing had happened. No punishment had arrived. That silence strengthened her belief that Sophia really was as unaware as Hudson claimed. Then a black SUV appeared in the mirror. Hudson barely noticed it. A second one moved through traffic behind him. This time he frowned. The first SUV changed lanes and came closer. Its movement was controlled but deliberate. Hudson glanced toward the driver, irritated by what he assumed was an aggressive motorist. Haley continued talking until she noticed the sudden tension in his face. "What?" "Nothing." Hudson accelerated slightly. The black vehicle matched him. His irritation changed to uncertainty. Ahead, the lanes narrowed between concrete barriers. Traffic slowed. The SUV moved forward until it was almost level with the Porsche. Then Hudson saw the passenger. For one instant, his mind refused to process the face behind the glass. Sophia. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. The color drained from his expression so quickly that Haley immediately looked toward the SUV. When she recognized Sophia, she stopped speaking. Everything inside the Porsche changed. The easy laughter disappeared. The music suddenly seemed too loud. The comfortable interior became claustrophobic. Hudson instinctively searched for an escape route, but the construction barriers left little space. Cars filled the lane ahead. Behind them, the second SUV had closed the distance. Sophia watched his reaction through the tinted window. That single look told her everything. There was no confusion on Hudson's face, only fear. He understood immediately why she was there. The first SUV moved ahead and slowed as traffic compressed into the construction zone. The second remained behind the Porsche, preventing Hudson from reversing or changing position easily. The maneuver forced all three vehicles to reduce speed and pull toward a safe stopping area created along the narrowed section. Hudson brought the Porsche to a halt. For several seconds, nobody moved. Motorists nearby began looking over, curious about the sudden formation of luxury vehicles. A few lowered their windows. Someone farther back raised a phone, sensing that something unusual was about to happen. Sophia opened the door. She stepped onto the pavement with complete composure. Hudson stared at her through the windshield. Haley looked as though she wanted to disappear. Arthur exited from the opposite side and came around the front of the SUV. His presence made Hudson's panic visibly worse. Hudson had always understood that Arthur was powerful, influential, and fiercely protective of his family. Seeing both father and daughter standing together removed any hope that this was an emotional misunderstanding he could talk his way out of. Sophia approached the Porsche slowly. She stopped a short distance away. Hudson finally opened the driver's door. Sophia. Her name came out as both greeting and plea. She said nothing. He stepped halfway out of the car, looking rapidly between her and Arthur. I can explain. Sophia almost smiled. Of all the sentences Hudson could have chosen, that one was the most predictable. You can explain Chicago, she asked calmly. Hudson froze. You can explain the client emergency. No answer. The meetings. His mouth opened but nothing came. Sophia looked past him toward Haley. And I assume she was part of the regional management team. Haley turned her face away. Several people nearby had now stopped paying attention to traffic entirely. Phones appeared in more hands. The visual scene alone demanded attention. A wealthy-looking couple in a Porsche, two black SUVs, a furious older man and a woman whose calmness seemed more threatening than shouting. Hudson lowered his voice. Can we do this at home? Sophia's expression hardened. Which home? The question hit him immediately. She continued before he could respond. The estate where you live with me, or the multimillion-dollar villa where you moved your girlfriend. Haley's eyes widened. Hudson stared at Sophia. That was the moment the last illusion disappeared. She knew about the house. Sophia watched the realization spread across his face. I went there, she said. Her voice remained even. I saw the clothes, the cosmetics, the food, the bedroom, the furniture, everything. Hudson took a step backward. Sophia, listen. No, you have been doing enough talking. The surrounding crowd grew quieter. Sophia pointed toward the Porsche. That car belongs to me. Hudson swallowed. The house where Haley has been living belongs to me. Haley shifted uncomfortably. The credit cards paying for your restaurants, jewelry, hotels, and this weekend belong to accounts funded by me. Every sentence stripped away another layer of Hudson's manufactured identity. The money you transferred to her was not money you earned. Hudson looked toward the ground. The lifestyle you used to impress her was not yours. Sophia's tone sharpened slightly. You wanted her to believe you were a wealthy man rescuing her from an ordinary life. So you borrowed my wealth, my property, my car, my reputation, and my trust, then presented all of it as your own. Murmurs moved through the nearby motorists. Haley suddenly spoke. He told me everything was his. Sophia turned toward her. For the first time, Haley looked less arrogant than frightened. He told you the house was his. Haley hesitated. He said, that the Porsche was his. Silence. That he controlled the accounts. Haley looked toward Hudson as though expecting him to rescue her. He could not. Sophia studied her. You were happy to believe it because the lie benefited you. Haley's face tightened. I didn't know. You knew he was married. That ended the excuse. A man nearby raised his phone higher. Another whispered to someone beside him. Sophia noticed the cameras but did not stop. In fact, their presence gave the confrontation a form Hudson and Haley had created themselves. They had chosen public humiliation when Haley posted her story. Sophia was simply returning the truth to the same public space. Hudson tried again. Sophia, please. We made mistakes. We. Her eyes fixed on him. You did not accidentally spend months lying to me. You did not accidentally move another woman into my property. You did not accidentally use my accounts to finance your affair. His face tightened with shame. You planned it, repeatedly. Arthur remained silent behind Sophia, but Hudson could feel his presence. There was no possibility of intimidating Sophia and no room to redirect the conversation. The power balance had completely reversed. Then Sophia reached into her bag and removed her phone. Haley saw the screen and immediately knew what was coming. No. It was the first word she had spoken with genuine panic. Sophia opened the saved Instagram story. You remember this? Haley looked away. Sophia turned the screen outward. The video showed Haley inside the Porsche wearing Sophia's sunglasses, smiling into the camera with Hudson beside her. People nearest them leaned closer. Then Sophia read the caption, "Road trip to the Hamptons with my future hubby." Haley's face burned. Sophia continued, "The clueless sugar mama wife at home has no idea we're living the high life." A few people in the crowd reacted audibly. Someone laughed in disbelief. Another person muttered something about arrogance. Sophia looked directly at Haley. "You were very confident when you wrote that." Haley's eyes filled with tears, but Sophia did not soften. "You wanted strangers to see me as stupid. You wanted people to believe you had taken my husband, my lifestyle, and my property while I sat at home knowing nothing." Haley shook her head. "I was angry. I didn't mean. You posted it publicly." Sophia raised the phone slightly. "You made sure the world could see it." Then she looked around at the cameras surrounding them. "So now the world can see the rest." The callback was devastating. Haley had used social media to humiliate Sophia, believing the post was proof of victory. Now the exact same clip had become evidence of entitlement, deception, and deliberate cruelty. Hudson stepped closer. "Sophia, enough." Arthur moved immediately. He did not touch Hudson. He simply stepped between them, forcing Hudson to stop. "Do not tell her when enough is enough," Arthur said. His voice was quiet, which made it more intimidating. Hudson backed away. Sophia returned her attention to her husband. "I trusted you." For the first time, emotion entered her voice. Not weakness. Disappointment. "I defended your position. I believed you deserved opportunities. I thought success in our marriage meant building something together." Hudson's eyes lowered. "And while I was doing that, you were telling another woman that my success belonged to you." He said nothing. "You called my cards your money." Silence. "My car became your car." Another pause. "My house became your house." Sophia took one step closer. "And eventually you began treating me as though I were the outsider in a life I created." Hudson finally looked at her. Whatever confidence had once allowed him to maintain two lives had disappeared. He seemed smaller. That was when Sophia understood something important. Hudson's power had never truly existed. He had possessed access. Access to her money. Access to her company. Access to her home. Access to her reputation. Access to her trust. He had confused those privileges with ownership. Sophia reached into her pocket and took out the spare Porsche key. Hudson watched it. "This is the last time you drive my car." She pressed the lock button. The Porsche chirped. Hudson frowned. "What are you doing?" "Ending your access." She turned toward Arthur's security staff. "The vehicle stays with us." Hudson stared at her. "You can't leave us here." Sophia looked almost amused. "Why not? You told Haley you were the man providing all of this. I'm sure you'll find a solution." Haley looked at Hudson. For the first time, doubt replaced dependence in her expression. Sophia noticed. The relationship was already beginning to change. She continued, "Your cards are being canceled." Hudson's face went pale. "The accounts you use are being restricted." "Sophia, your access to both properties is being removed." His panic increased. "You can't lock me out of my own home." Sophia's expression became cold. "You should have thought about ownership before using someone else's property to impress your girlfriend." He looked toward Arthur. Arthur did not intervene. Sophia continued, "Your position in my company is also over." That struck harder than the others. Hudson's professional identity had been one of the few things he still considered his own. "You can't fire me because of our marriage. This is not about our marriage." Sophia's voice was precise. "It is about misconduct, misuse of resources, dishonesty, and the reputational damage you have now created for the company." The surrounding phones captured every word. Hudson finally seemed to understand the full scale of what was happening. This confrontation was not only personal, it was public. Even if Sophia had wanted to preserve his reputation, it was already too late. Haley's own post, combined with the scene unfolding on the highway, had created exactly the kind of spectacle that spread faster than any formal announcement. Someone nearby was live streaming. Another person had already uploaded a short clip. Within minutes, fragments of the confrontation began circulating online. The arrogant Instagram story, the cheating husband, the wealthy wife confronting him beside her own Porsche, the mistress wearing belongings that were not hers. The story contained every ingredient social media rewarded. Hudson looked around and finally noticed how many cameras were pointed toward him. "Stop filming," he shouted. That only encouraged more people. His desperation became part of the spectacle. Haley covered her face. Sophia did not celebrate. She simply watched the consequences arrive. A notification appeared on someone's phone nearby. Another person exclaimed that the video was already being shared. Hudson's carefully maintained professional image began collapsing in real time. For years, he had resented being known as Sophia's husband. He wanted people to believe he was independently powerful. Now the public was learning the opposite. The cars, houses, spending, and status he displayed had all depended on the woman he betrayed. The irony was brutal. Sophia turned toward the SUV. Hudson followed her. "Please." The word stopped her for a moment. She looked back. He seemed desperate now, but the desperation contained little of the remorse she once hoped she might see. What frightened him most was not losing Sophia's love. It was losing everything attached to her. That realization removed the last trace of doubt from her decision. "The divorce papers will come through my attorney." Hudson looked stunned. "Sophia, our marriage is finished." No dramatic pause followed. No final argument. She had already made the decision before arriving. Arthur opened the SUV door for her. Sophia paused beside it and turned toward Haley. The younger woman was standing several feet from the Porsche, visibly shaken, no longer looking like the triumphant woman from the Instagram video. Sophia did not insult her. She did not need to. Instead, she said one sentence. "The luxury was never yours." Then she looked at Hudson. "And neither was the power." Sophia entered the SUV. Arthur followed. The doors closed. As the vehicle pulled away, Hudson and Haley remained beside the Porsche under the eyes of strangers and cameras. The contrast between their departure from the Hamptons and their current reality could not have been more severe. Hours earlier, they had been a smiling couple surrounded by stolen luxury. Now Hudson was facing the loss of his marriage job, home, financial access, and professional standing, while Haley was discovering that the man she had treated like a wealthy protector had possessed almost nothing independently. The first financial consequence arrived before they had even left the highway. Hudson attempted to use one of the cards associated with Sophia's accounts. Declined. He tried another. Declined. His stomach tightened. At almost the same time, Sophia's banking team began removing his access from accounts and authorized credit lines. Security arrangements at the estate were updated. Entry codes were changed. The villa where Haley had been living was no longer available to her. The illusion of unlimited money disappeared faster than either of them could process. Then came the professional consequences. Video of the confrontation spread across social media with astonishing speed. Clips were reposted, edited, discussed, and analyzed. Haley's original Instagram story circulated beside footage of Sophia exposing the source of the luxury visible in it. What Haley had intended as proof that she had defeated an unsuspecting wife now looked like evidence of extraordinary arrogance. Hudson's name became attached to accusations of infidelity, financial exploitation, and abuse of privilege. People inside the company saw the footage. So did clients. So did colleagues who had long suspected that Hudson's status came primarily from his connection to Sophia. The story confirmed their worst assumptions. By the time formal employment action arrived, much of his professional credibility had already vanished. Haley suffered similar consequences. The young employee who once portrayed herself online as the chosen partner of a powerful man was now publicly identified as the woman living in another person's property while enjoying purchases financed through that person's property accounts. Her image shifted almost instantly from glamorous mistress to opportunist. Neither of them could control the narrative. They had lost that ability the moment their own actions became public evidence. Back at the estate, Sophia moved through the next steps without hesitation. She instructed her financial advisors to terminate Hudson's access to personal credit facilities. She contacted security to change the gate codes and exterior locks. His permission to enter the properties was revoked. Personal belongings were collected and removed from the private areas of the house. Each action was practical, not theatrical. For Sophia, the important point was not revenge through destruction. It was separation. Every shared mechanism that allowed Hudson to continue benefiting from her resources had to end. Money, property, transportation, employment, reputation, marriage. One by one, the connections disappeared. When Hudson eventually tried to return to the estate, he discovered that the gates no longer recognized him. The key that had once opened the front door no longer worked. His access code failed. The house he had treated as though it were his own had become inaccessible because legally and financially it had never belonged to him in the way he imagined. That truth was difficult for him to accept. For years, privilege had surrounded him so consistently that he had begun to experience it as ownership. He wore expensive clothes, drove luxury vehicles, worked from an impressive office, stayed in beautiful homes, and spent money with little concern for consequences. The environment made him feel powerful. But almost every major piece of that environment had originated with Sophia. Without her trust, the structure collapsed. Haley discovered the same reality from another angle. The house she had treated as her private sanctuary was closed to her. The spending money stopped. The luxury cards no longer worked. The man who had promised unlimited comfort suddenly had no practical way to provide it. Their affair had survived beautifully while someone else's wealth supported it. Now it had to exist without that foundation. Almost immediately, tension appeared between them. Haley wanted Hudson to fix the situation. Hudson wanted Haley to stop demanding solutions he no longer possessed. The very dynamic that had attracted them to each other began working in reverse. She had admired him because he seemed capable of providing anything. He had desired her because she made him feel like that provider. Once the money disappeared, both illusions collapsed at the same time. Sophia did not witness those arguments. She did not need to. By the time she stood alone in her home that evening, the public spectacle was already spreading far beyond the highway. Videos continued circulating online. Commentators repeated the details. Colleagues contacted one another. Corporate communications teams prepared responses. Hudson's carefully constructed image was no longer something he controlled. Sophia looked out through the windows toward the dark driveway. For the first time in months, she did not wonder where Hudson was. She did not need to check a tracking application. She did not need to study transactions or listen for lies. The investigation had ended. So had the marriage. There was pain in that realization, but there was also relief. Hudson and Haley had spent months building a fantasy from stolen access, borrowed wealth, deception, and contempt. They believed Sophia's silence proved that she was weak, unaware, and easy to exploit. Now the truth was public. Hudson no longer had the money that made him feel powerful. Haley no longer had the luxury that made the affair feel glamorous. Neither had the reputation that once allowed them to move through the world with confidence. Sophia, meanwhile, had recovered something more important than a car, a house, or a credit card. She had recovered control over her own life. And as the digital world continued dismantling Hudson and Haley's carefully constructed image, Sophia understood that the collapse unfolding behind her was no longer hers to manage. She had exposed the truth. Everything that happened next would be the consequence of what they had built themselves. The collapse of Hudson and Haley's relationship began almost as soon as the luxury disappeared. For months, their affair had survived inside an artificial world of expensive dinners, designer gifts, fast cars, private estates, and the thrill of believing they were getting away with something. Hudson had enjoyed presenting himself as a wealthy, powerful man capable of providing anything Haley wanted, while Haley had fed his ego by treating him like a hero who could rescue her from financial struggle. As long as Sophia's money continued flowing into that fantasy, neither of them had been forced to question what actually held them together. Once the credit cards stopped working, the properties were closed to them, and Hudson's professional status vanished. The illusion cracked almost immediately. Their first serious argument happened only hours after the public confrontation. Hudson was furious that videos from the highway were spreading across social media, but instead of accepting responsibility, he turned on Haley. He blamed her for posting the Instagram story that had given Sophia public proof of their arrogance. According to him, everything might have continued if Haley had not been so desperate to show off. He accused her of ruining his career, his marriage, and his reputation because she could not resist broadcasting their secret life to strangers. Haley responded with equal bitterness. She reminded Hudson that he had been the one making promises. He had told her that Sophia was too busy, too trusting, and too unaware to ever discover the truth. He had spoken as though the house belonged to him, described Sophia's financial resources as if he controlled them, and repeatedly assured Haley that she never needed to worry about money. He had encouraged her to believe that the luxurious lifestyle surrounding them was permanent. Now, standing beside a man whose cards no longer worked and whose access to his former home had disappeared, Haley understood how little of that power had actually been his. "You told me you had everything under control," she accused him. Hudson answered by saying that she had destroyed everything. Within days, the affection that once seemed intense had turned into resentment. The problem was simple. Haley had fallen in love with an image of Hudson as a provider, while Hudson had become addicted to the way that image made him feel. Neither relationship could survive when reality replaced fantasy. Without Sophia's resources, Hudson had very little to offer. Without Hudson's access to those resources, Haley had little reason to continue seeing him as extraordinary. Their romance had not been built on sacrifice, patience, or genuine partnership. It had been built on deception, ego dependency, and stolen luxury. The change in their circumstances was brutal. Hudson received formal confirmation that his employment had been terminated. The position that had once given him professional status disappeared, and the viral footage made it difficult for him to rebuild his reputation elsewhere. Colleagues who had treated him respectfully now avoided association with him. Clients knew his name for the wrong reasons. The public story was no longer about a marketing executive with valuable experience. It was about a cheating husband who had used his wife's wealth to finance a secret relationship. Haley suffered consequences of her own. Her association with the scandal damaged her professional prospects, and the public post she had once considered a triumph became one of the most damaging pieces of evidence against her image. People remembered the phrase "clueless sugar mama wife," but now it was repeated not to ridicule Sophia but to demonstrate how confidently Haley had mocked the woman whose property and money were supporting her lifestyle. When Hudson and Haley finally found themselves living without the comfort they had taken for granted, their arguments became constant. Every expense became a source of tension. Every disappointment became an opportunity to assign blame. Hudson insisted that Haley had destroyed his life with one reckless social media post. Haley accused him of being a fraud who had pretended to possess wealth, influence, and control he never truly had. The glamorous weekend in the Hamptons became a distant memory. There were no luxury hotels now. No expensive restaurants. No Porsche. No mansion. No limitless spending. Only two people staring at each other and realizing that the qualities they had admired were disappearing together with the money. Their relationship did not survive the truth. Meanwhile, Sophia moved in the opposite direction. The public confrontation had ended her marriage emotionally, but she still needed to complete the separation legally and practically. She retained experienced attorneys and filed for divorce, providing the evidence she had collected during the weeks of investigation. The financial records, photographs, communications, and documentation of Hudson's misuse of her resources created a clear picture of what had happened. Hudson had once assumed that marriage gave him permanent access to Sophia's world. The legal reality proved otherwise. Sophia had spent years protecting the corporate empire and assets she had created. Her property investments, business interests, and major accounts had been carefully structured. The wealth Hudson enjoyed had always been connected to Sophia's success rather than his ownership. Once the marriage ended, the distinction became impossible to ignore. The divorce moved forward. Sophia did not spend her days obsessing over whether Hudson was suffering enough. At first, she expected revenge to feel satisfying. She imagined that seeing him lose access to the life he had exploited would bring some dramatic sense of victory. Instead, what she felt was quieter. Relief. For the first time in months, she could wake up without wondering which part of her husband's story was false. She no longer checked his location, examined his spending, or watched the way he positioned his phone at dinner. She did not need to interpret strange perfume, unexplained charges, or sudden business trips. The constant vigilance was gone. That absence created a kind of peace Sophia had almost forgotten was possible. She gradually realized that the greatest damage Hudson had caused was not financial. He had turned her own home into a place of uncertainty. He had made trust feel dangerous. He had forced her into the position of investigator inside a marriage where she should have felt safe. Removing him from her life meant reclaiming much more than property. It meant reclaiming silence without suspicion, sleep without anxiety, success without wondering who was secretly resenting it. Sophia's attention returned to the modern estate that had once represented the most painful symbol of the betrayal. For a time, she considered selling it. The rooms carried memories she did not want. She could still remember the foreign cosmetics on the vanity, the clothes hanging where they did not belong, the cheap personal items scattered across spaces she had designed with care. Every corner seemed contaminated by the knowledge that Hudson had used the house to construct a second life. Then Sophia changed her mind. Selling the property would mean allowing Hudson and Haley's actions to determine what the house represented forever. She refused. Instead, she reclaimed it. Furniture associated with that period was removed. Rooms were redesigned. Materials, textures, lighting, and details changed until the interior no longer looked like the place she had discovered during the worst days of her marriage. Sophia hired a new design team but made the final decisions herself. The renovated house became cleaner, brighter, and more personal. What had once been intended as a shared family dream became a space that reflected only her own choices. She eventually moved into it. The first night she slept there after the renovation, Sophia expected painful memories to return. They did not. The house was silent. No hidden occupant waited upstairs. No husband was lying beside her while communicating with another woman. No secret life existed behind a locked door. It belonged to her again, not merely in legal documents but emotionally. Her business life underwent a similar transformation. Freed from the strain of maintaining a marriage built on deception, Sophia directed her attention back toward the company with renewed clarity. She pursued new acquisitions, strengthened the leadership structure, and expanded into markets she had been considering for years. The same discipline that had helped her survive Hudson's betrayal became useful in a far healthier context. The company grew. Her influence increased. Yet Sophia viewed success differently now. Before, the betrayal achievement had always meant building more revenue, more properties, more market share, greater professional recognition. Afterward, success also meant knowing what she refused to tolerate. She became more protective of her time and more selective about the people around her. Loyalty mattered more. Peace mattered more. The ability to leave situations that damaged her self-respect became as important as the ability to win difficult negotiations. Sophia did not immediately search for another relationship. For a long time, she had no interest in proving that she could replace Hudson. She did not need another man beside her to demonstrate that she had recovered. Instead, she allowed herself to build a life that felt complete without romance. She spent more time with family and trusted friends. She traveled without checking anyone else's schedule. She attended events because she wanted to be there rather than because they supported a particular image of married success. Slowly, the betrayal stopped feeling like the central event of her identity. Hudson became part of her history rather than a presence in her present. That distinction was the beginning of real freedom. Time continued moving. 5 years later, Sophia's life looked very different from the one Hudson had once occupied. She remained successful, but the hard edge that had developed during the confrontation had softened into confidence. She no longer needed constant proof that she was in control. Control had become internal. Her home was peaceful. Her business was stronger than ever. The people closest to her were there because they respected her, not because they wanted access to what she owned. And eventually, love returned to her life. Alex was different from Hudson in ways that Sophia noticed gradually rather than dramatically. He did not compete with her success or treat it as something that diminished him. He did not need to exaggerate his importance in order to stand beside her. He respected her independence, understood the demands of her work, and never treated her wealth as a measure of his own worth. Most importantly, Sophia felt calm around him. That feeling mattered more than excitement. With Hudson, she had once mistaken gestures for security. With Alex, security came from consistency. He did what he said he would do. He did not disappear behind unexplained schedules. He did not react defensively when she asked ordinary questions. There was no need to decode him. Sophia could simply believe what was in front of her. The relationship developed slowly, built not on dependency but mutual respect. By the time they married, Sophia no longer saw love as surrendering control over her life. She understood that genuine partnership did not require one person to become smaller so the other could feel powerful. Years after the scandal, Hudson's name occasionally returned to Sophia's attention. Sometimes it appeared indirectly through old acquaintances. Sometimes through a brief article or a conversation at a social event. His life had continued deteriorating after the divorce, and his relationship with Haley had never recovered from the collapse of the lifestyle that had originally sustained it. The consequences of their decisions followed them long after the public fascination faded. Once news about Hudson would have triggered anger in Sophia, 5 years later it produced almost nothing. That surprised her. She had spent so much time believing that healing would arrive when Hudson finally understood what he had lost. Eventually, she realized his understanding was irrelevant. Whether he regretted betraying her did not change her life. Whether Haley regretted mocking her did not restore anything valuable. Their punishment was no longer connected to Sophia's peace. That realization became clearest one evening after a formal charity event. Sophia returned home with Alex and stepped onto the private balcony overlooking the illuminated gardens of the estate. The same property that had once represented betrayal now looked completely different beneath the night sky. Alex joined her and wrapped his arms gently around her. Earlier that evening, someone had mentioned Hudson's latest troubles. Alex had noticed that Sophia barely reacted. He asked whether hearing the name still bothered her. Sophia thought for a moment. Then she smiled. Years earlier, she explained she had believed that Hudson had tried to steal her crown. At the time, that crown seemed obvious. The company. The houses, the Porsche, the bank accounts, the social position, the visible symbols of everything she had worked to build. When she discovered Hudson giving those things to Haley, Sophia had felt as though another woman was being placed inside the life that belonged to her. That was why the betrayal had felt so personal. But over time, Sophia understood that none of those things had ever been the real source of her power. A car could be replaced. A house could be renovated. Money could be earned again. A company could grow, shrink, or change. Even public reputation could disappear and later be rebuilt. Her true crown was something else. It was the dignity that allowed her to walk away when love became humiliation. It was the self-respect that prevented someone else's betrayal from defining her value. It was the emotional peace she had recovered when she stopped needing Hudson to suffer in order for her to feel victorious. It was the freedom to choose who could remain in her life. Most of all, it was the knowledge that no husband-mistress scandal or public humiliation could take control of her identity unless she surrendered it willingly. Sophia looked out across the estate and felt no desire to revisit the past. Hudson and Haley had once believed they were stealing her world while she remained unaware. In reality, they had only borrowed its most superficial pieces. They had touched the money. They had used the car. They had occupied the house. They had tried to damage her pride. But they had never possessed the part of Sophia that mattered most. Her strength had survived. Her dignity had survived. Her ability to love had survived. And the life she had built afterward was no longer shaped by revenge, fear, or the need to prove anything to the people who had betrayed her. Sophia leaned into Alex's embrace and allowed the quiet of the evening to settle around them. For years she had imagined victory as standing above the people who had tried to destroy her. Now she understood it differently. Victory was waking up without hatred. It was looking at the past without wanting to return to it. It was loving again without abandoning herself. It was being able to stand inside a home once associated with betrayal and feel only peace. The crown Sophia had fought so fiercely to reclaim had never been made of wealth, property cars, or corporate power. It was made of self-respect, dignity, emotional freedom, and the right to control her own destiny. And that was the one crown no one could ever steal from her.